The champagne flutes clinked together with a sound that should have been joyous, but to me, it rang hollow as a funeral bell. I stood in the corner of what was supposed to be my wedding reception, watching my sister Melissa and her husband Derek renew their vows at the altar that had been mine just 30 minutes earlier. "Isn't this wonderful, sweetheart?" Mom gushed as she approached me, her face glowing with satisfaction. Two celebrations in one, so efficient and meaningful. I forced a smile, my wedding dress suddenly feeling like a costume in someone else's play. "Yeah, Mom." Wonderful. But it wasn't wonderful. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being second to my perfect sister, and I was only just beginning to understand how deep this rabbit hole went. It had started 6 months earlier when I got engaged to James. We'd planned a modest but elegant wedding. Nothing too extravagant, just something beautiful and meaningful for our closest friends and family. When I told my parents, Dad had immediately offered to help with costs. "We want this to be special for you, honey," he'd said, pulling me into one of his rare hugs. "You deserve the world." Mom had nodded enthusiastically. "And wouldn't it be lovely if we could somehow incorporate Melissa and Derek's 10-year anniversary? They've been so busy with the kids and Derek's business that they haven't had time to celebrate properly." I should have seen the red flag then, but I was so touched by their apparent generosity and so desperate for their approval that I agreed. "That sounds nice. Maybe they could say a few words during the reception?" "Perfect." Mom had clapped her hands together. "Leave everything to us." And I did. God help me, I left everything to them. Over the next few months, the wedding planning took on a life of its own. The guest list ballooned from our intended 50 people to nearly 200. The modest country club venue became the grand ballroom at the Riverside Hotel. The simple dinner became a 7-course gourmet meal with an open bar that included top-shelf liquor. "But Mom, this is way more than James and I wanted," I protested during one particularly overwhelming planning session. "Nonsense, darling. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. And think how happy Melissa will be to celebrate her anniversary in style. You know how hard things have been for them since Derek's business hit that rough patch." Every time I tried to scale things back, Mom would invoke Melissa's name, and every time, I would cave. Because that's what I'd always done. Melissa was the successful one, the one with the perfect marriage and the beautiful children. Melissa was the one who never put a foot wrong, and I was just Rachel, the younger sister who tried too hard and never quite measured up. The morning of the wedding, I woke up with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with pre-wedding jitters. James found me sitting on the edge of our hotel bed at 6 a.m., staring at my wedding dress hanging in the closet. "Having second thoughts?" he asked gently, sitting beside me. "Not about you. Never about you. Just, something feels off about all this." He took my hand. "We can still elope, you know. Drive to Vegas right now." I almost said yes. God, how I wish I had said yes. Instead, I shook my head. "No. My parents have put so much work into this. So much money." That was the first lie I told myself that day. It wouldn't be the last. The ceremony itself was beautiful. I'll give them that. James and I exchanged vows under an arch of white roses and baby's breath while 200 guests looked on. For a moment, walking down that aisle, I felt like the most important person in the world. Then came the reception. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ announced as James and I finished our first dance, "we have a special surprise tonight. Mr. and Mrs. Derek Morrison will be renewing their vows to celebrate their 10-year anniversary." The crowd erupted in applause as Melissa and Derek stepped onto the dance floor. She was wearing a stunning silver gown that somehow managed to outshine my wedding dress, and he looked handsome in a tuxedo that was clearly more expensive than James's rental. "What's happening?" James whispered in my ear as we were ushered to the side. I don't know. But I was starting to get an idea, and it made my stomach churn. The vow renewal was elaborate, more elaborate than my actual wedding ceremony had been. There was a second arch of flowers, different music, and a whole new set of photographers capturing every moment. The guests were completely enthralled, taking pictures and videos of the adorable couple renewing their commitment. As I watched from the sidelines, still in my wedding dress but no longer the center of attention, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The flowers, the decorations, the elaborate setup. It was all coordinated. This wasn't a last-minute addition to my wedding. This had been planned from the beginning. My wedding hadn't been expanded to accommodate Melissa's anniversary celebration. Melissa's anniversary celebration had been disguised as my wedding. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and growing dread. Guests congratulated me politely but spent most of their time gushing over how romantic Melissa and Derek's renewal was. The photographer took a few obligatory shots of James and me, but I noticed he spent far more time capturing Melissa and Derek's perfect moments. During dinner, I finally got a chance to corner my father. "Dad, can I talk to you for a minute?" He was deep in conversation with Derek about some business opportunity, but he nodded distractedly. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" "I just wanted to thank you again for all this. It must have cost a fortune." For just a second, something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe? But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Don't you worry about that, honey. You just enjoy your special day." "But seriously, Dad, the hotel, the catering, the flowers, this has to be $60,000–$70,000 at least." "Rachel." His voice had a warning tone I recognized from childhood. I said, "Don't worry about it." That's when I knew. That's when the last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I excused myself and went to the ladies' room, where I called the hotel's event coordinator from my phone. "Hi, this is Rachel Chen. I'm one of the brides tonight. I just wanted to double-check who the invoice should be sent to." "Oh, congratulations, Mrs. Chen. What a beautiful event." "Yes, I have the billing information right here. Everything will be sent to you at the address we have on file." My hand started shaking. "I'm sorry. Can you remind me what address you have?" She rattled off my apartment address. The apartment I shared with James. The apartment where we already struggled to pay rent. And the total amount? $63,412, including gratuities. "Will you be paying by check or wire transfer?" I hung up without answering. $63,000 in my name. For an event that was supposedly their gift to me, but was really their gift to Melissa. I stood in that marble-tiled bathroom, still in my wedding dress, and felt something die inside me. Not love. I still loved my family, despite everything. But trust. Respect. The desperate need for their approval that had driven me to make terrible decisions my entire life, that died in that bathroom, and something else was born in its place, something cold and calculating and absolutely furious. I walked back to the reception with a smile on my face. I danced with James, cut the cake, and threw my bouquet. I played the part of the happy bride while my mind raced, planning. The next morning, while James slept off the celebration, I got to work. First, I called my bank and reported my identity as stolen, claiming someone had used my information to book a large event without my knowledge. I provided them with all the documentation I had, or rather, didn't have. Because of course I had never signed anything. I had never seen a contract or an invoice. My parents had handled everything, using information they had as my next of kin. The bank launched an immediate investigation. Next, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. Derek's business partner's divorce attorney, who I knew from family gatherings and who had always harbored a professional grudge against Derek. "Rachel," Lisa Martinez said when I explained the situation, "what they did was fraud. Using your name and credit without authorization to book services, This is a federal crime. I don't want to send them to jail, I said quickly. I just want them to face consequences. Oh, they will, Lisa said grimly. Trust me on that. The legal wheels started turning immediately. Lisa filed papers challenging the contract on grounds of fraud and identity theft. She also sent a cease and desist letter to the hotel, informing them that any attempts to collect payment from me would result in legal action against them as well. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. See, I knew something about Melissa and Derek that the rest of the family didn't. During the planning process, I'd overheard Mom talking to Melissa about Derek's business troubles. They weren't just in a rough patch, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. The anniversary party wasn't just a celebration, it was a last hurrah before they lost everything. And I knew something else. Derek had been telling potential investors that he had family backing for his business. Specifically, that my father was going to be a major investor. I made some calls to people in Derek's industry, not to spread gossip, just to ask innocent questions about business opportunities. Questions that would naturally lead to discussions about Derek's financial situation and the reliability of his claimed investors. Within a week, Derek's last potential investor pulled out. But I still wasn't done. See, throughout our childhood, Melissa had been the golden child, partly because she'd been the responsible one. She'd never gotten in trouble, never made mistakes, never embarrassed the family. Her reputation was spotless, and she guarded it fiercely. So when I, accidentally, posted a Facebook album of wedding photos that happened to include several shots of Melissa clearly drunk and dancing inappropriately with the best man while Derek was in the bathroom, well, accidents happen, right? And when I accidentally sent a group text to Mom's church friends that included screenshots of Melissa's very explicit complaints about Derek's performance in bed, taken from drunken texts she'd sent me years ago, well, sometimes technology is so confusing. By the end of the second week, the dominoes were falling exactly as I'd planned. Derek's business collapsed completely when his final investor pulled out. The scandal from the photos and texts had made Melissa a pariah in Mom's social circle. And Dad received a letter from the FBI Financial Crimes Unit informing him that he was under investigation for identity fraud. That's when they called. Rachel, we need to talk. Dad's voice was strained when he reached me at work. About what, Dad? You know about what? The lawyers? The investigation? He lowered his voice. The wedding. Oh, you mean the wedding where you used my name to run up $63,000 in bills without my knowledge or consent? That wedding? Silence. How? He finally asked. How what? How did I find out? How did I prove it? Or how could you do this to me? Rachel? No, Dad. You don't get to Rachel me. You committed fraud. You stole my identity to throw a party for Melissa, and you were going to let me pay for it. We were going to help. Help? Help? You were going to help me pay for my own sister's anniversary party that you disguised as my wedding? More silence. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. You're going to call the hotel right now and transfer all charges to your name. You're going to pay every penny of that $63,000. And then you're going to call off Mom's little prayer circle gossip campaign about how I'm going through a difficult time and making terrible decisions. And if we don't? If you don't, the FBI investigation continues. The civil lawsuit Lisa filed goes to trial. And I keep posting family photos on social media. Did you know I have videos from Derek's bachelor party from 10 years ago? Really interesting videos. I could hear him discussing it with Mom in the background, their voices hushed and urgent. Fine, he said finally. Fine. But Rachel, this is family. No, I cut him off. Family doesn't commit fraud against family. Family doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't humiliate family at their own wedding. I hung up. The next day, I received confirmation that all charges had been transferred to my parents' account. Lisa called to inform me that they'd also agreed to pay her legal fees and sign a document admitting wrongdoing in exchange for dropping the criminal complaint. But the real victory came 2 weeks later at Sunday dinner. I walked into my parents' house for the first time since the wedding, James beside me for moral support. Melissa and Derek were already there with their kids, but the atmosphere was arctic. "Rachel," Mom said stiffly as we sat down, "I hope you're happy." "Actually, I am. Thanks for asking." Derek couldn't even look at me. His business was finished, and word had gotten around about why his investors had fled. Melissa sat beside him, her perfect composure cracked, dark circles under her eyes from dealing with the social fallout of the photos and texts. "You've destroyed this family," Dad said quietly. "No," I replied, serving myself from the dish of Mom's famous pot roast. "I've just refused to let this family destroy me anymore. We were trying to help Melissa. By stealing from me. By lying to me. By turning my wedding into her anniversary party." I looked around the table at their faces, angry, defeated, ashamed. "You want to help Melissa? Help her. Use your own money, your own credit, your own reputation. But don't ever use mine again." The silence stretched out until little Emma, Melissa's daughter, piped up, "Mommy, why is everyone so sad?" Melissa's composure finally cracked completely. She started crying, not the delicate tears of a grieving mother, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone whose perfect life had crumbled. "Because," I said gently, reaching over to squeeze Emma's hand, "sometimes adults make really bad choices, and then they have to face the consequences. But that's how we learn to make better choices next time." I stood up, James following my lead. "We're going to go now." Lunch was lovely. As we reached the door, Dad called after me, "Rachel, wait." I turned. "I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time I heard genuine regret in his voice. "We're all sorry. We've always worried about Melissa more. She seems to need more help." "She needs help because you've always given it to her," I replied. "And I've learned not to need it because you never offered it. But I'm done with that now." "What does that mean?" I smiled. Not the bitter smile of revenge, but something softer. Something like peace. "It means I'm done trying to earn your approval. I'm done accepting scraps and calling them gifts. I'm done being grateful for mistreatment." I took James's hand. "I'm done being your backup daughter." "Rachel, I love you all," I said, and I meant it. "But I love myself more now. And that's something I should have learned a long time ago." We left then, driving away from the house where I'd spent so many years trying to be enough, trying to matter, trying to earn a place at the table that should have been mine by right. 6 months later, James and I had a real wedding. Just us, 2 witnesses, and a justice of the peace in a courthouse downtown. We paid for it ourselves. All $300 of it, including lunch afterward. It was perfect. Melissa and Derek divorced 8 months later. She moved back in with my parents, who now struggle to pay their bills after the wedding expenditure, and Derek's failed business loans they'd co-signed. Derek disappeared, leaving behind a mountain of debt and broken promises. I don't take pleasure in their pain, but I don't regret my choices either. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who claim to love us the most, and sometimes the kindest thing we can do, for them and for ourselves, is to refuse to be hurt anymore. My relationship with my family is different now, distant but honest. They know where the boundaries are, and I know they'll respect them because they understand the consequences of not doing so. And I finally learned the most important lesson of all. Revenge isn't about destroying other people. It's about refusing to be destroyed. It's about choosing yourself when everyone else chooses someone else. It's about building a life so good that their approval becomes irrelevant. The best revenge, it turns out, is living well on your own terms, even if it costs them $63,000 to learn that lesson.